Stop messing around, stop fooling around, stop delaying, stop procrastinating. Get up, get out, get it done. Everything is possible, nothing is a problem, and anything can be overcome. I just get my ass up out of bed, I get my shit together, and I get out and I start the fight. And that will transform you from a mere mortal into a superhuman being. I've never, ever, ever met anybody who told me that they got rich watching their IRA or their 401k.
Welcome back, Peter. How's it going?
Hey, George. I'm great. Good to see you. You look very shiny today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Shaved just for you. Yeah, we're happy local summer.
I was so depressed, I left the place where I stay over the summer. You go over a bridge.
Yeah.
And it was Labor Day Monday, and I was so depressed because I never have done that on Labor Day Monday. I'm always like, no, I'm not going to do Monday.
Yep.
I'm going to go back later in the week, or I'll stay through the week, or, fuck the world. Like,
totally.
I can stay.
Yeah.
I left Labor Day Monday, and I left the bridge, and I felt it. Like weighed on me.
Yeah. Now I hear that.
Yeah. But now I'm back to reality.
Back to the reality.
Life goes on.
Getting after it. No, totally. Yeah. I was wondering, we usually do a tweet, but today I was wondering if you wanted to read this quote that we have here and react to that. We'll start off that way.
You'd like me to read a quote?
Yes. Yeah.
I'll read a quote. So the quote is, and I love this one because it's from John Rockefeller, and I've seen this before. So he who works all day has no time to make money. So this is what John D. Rockefeller said way back when, and he even then understood the distinction between working and making money, right? It's not a new concept. It's so interesting to me that these things that were ideas and concepts before the world socioeconomically has evolved to where it is today, where things are divisive and people want to know how to get ahead and people want to succeed and people come to the United States to have opportunity. This is someone that saw all of this years ago, decades. So I've always felt that there's a major difference between working and making money. I've always felt like to make money, you needed to do other things than work. You need to invest, you needed to own stuff. Like I saw the people who were making lots of money were owning things. When I grew up, it was before the technology era. And so the people that I knew that were making a lot of money were the real estate guys and people that owned companies. I didn't know any techies, and we didn't have any people that started Facebook or people that started an app and sold it or people that started an Amazon, right? That didn't exist when I was a kid. So what I saw was that you had to own stuff to make a lot of money. And until you did, you were working and probably working really, really hard. So I saw that when I was a kid, but I wonder how many people out there recognize that and see that today. There's a difference between working and making money, and there's a difference between people that understand that. People that understand that difference are, I think, two different breeds of people.
Yeah, well, and we've talked a lot before about school, how school conditions you a particular way. And a lot of times, when you're in school, you feel like, well, I'm busy, I'm doing the work, and so that must be enough. When in actuality, it's not actually connected to the value that you're creating necessarily. And so it's one of those things. Yeah.
One of those things.
Totally. All right. Well,
thanks for putting this up.
100%.
I'm a fan of where this quote tries to go. And
Yeah, I've heard his book, or not his book, but there's a book about Rockefeller, Titan, that I've been meaning to read.
Titan.
It's apparently very huge, but I haven't read it yet. So this next reaction is from Ramit Sethi. This is the video one. So.
Okay.
This phrase, don't pay your landlord's mortgage.
Don't pay your landlord's mortgage.
It's
one of the most common phrases.
When people talk about renting versus
don't rent because you're paying your landlord's mortgage.
I think it's actually designed
He's going to break it down. Let's see what the
resentful,
breakdown is.
Angry. And indignant. Why should I pay someone else's mortgage?
Why should I pay someone else's mortgage? They're getting rich off of me.
Why shouldn't I get rich?
Why shouldn't I
I'll just buy my own place.
Okay. Go buy your own place.
The problem is that logic is very stupid.
Well,
why don't you feel guilty about paying your local restaurant owner's mortgage?
Right.
Or the car wash down the street?
Right.
Why
don't you feel guilty about making anybody who owns any business that you shop at or consume a service from?
Is that this
Why don't you feel guilty about that?
Engineered so that you feel resentful about the rent.
Well, look, and now you get into the landlord-tenant relationship, the historical, the stained landlord-tenant relationship. It's because of attitudes and comments like this, where people will say, don't be a renter. All you're going to do is make the property owner rich. You're going to pay his mortgage. Well, maybe, maybe not. You could go out and get your own place and do it, or you could work up to a point where one day in your life you might be able to do it. But you have to live somewhere. So either you're going to rent or you're going to own. And we've talked endlessly about how consumers are changing the way that they consume housing products and housing services. And what used to be considered the American dream of home ownership maybe is morphing into something really drastically different than what it used to be. And now people are finding all sorts of new ways to consume housing. Maybe they're going to be renters, maybe they're going to be homeowners, maybe they're going to have a mobile home or an RV or drive around the country in a van for 5 years, or they're going to have some hybrid version of owning and renting or rent to own, or all sorts of new things are coming out now. I mean, George, the banks are making it easier for people to borrow and put less money down so they could have easier access to home ownership. Rents are starting to stabilize, but they've gone up in double digits over the past several years, year-over-year increases in renting, because we have a housing shortage. You can either complain that you're making someone else rich, or you can just really get off your ass, go make the money you need to make to get what you want so that you're not a complainer anymore. I believe that this kind of thinking, what this gentleman is referring to in this video, this concept of don't pay the landlord's mortgage, you're just going to make that person rich. I think that's a cancerous seed that was planted. There is a lot of anger, there is a lot of resentment. The landlord-tenant relationship is historically strained and stressed because of thinking like this. It doesn't have to be that way. How about, yeah, excellent, high five, go pay your landlord rent. Isn't that great because you don't have all these other expenses and now you have other money left over to invest? Go find something to invest in. Start your investment career. Start a side business. Start that company you've been wanting to start. Why? Because all you have to do is pay rent. You don't have to pay for a big expensive house and put down 20 or 30 or 40% on a very, very expensive home. And you don't have that money to begin with. So now you got to go borrow it and you got to ask someone to lend you the down payment, like whatever. Like that's a complicated, expensive proposition. That's not right for everybody. Renting may not be right for a lot of people. So you have to find out what lane of housing consumer you are. And you're in that lane. You may have several different lanes over the course of your life. But right now, if you're young, you're trying to figure it out, pick a lane, pick one that's economical, that's feasible, that you can live within your means. Live wherever you're going to live and get going. Get busy, man.
It's funny, you mentioned the different kinds of American dreams and you were talking about, driving around in a van. I feel like what I know about you with the Dude Ranch and the Berlin Wall and all these things, I feel like when you were younger, in your 20s, I feel like now if you're coming up, you would be into that van life experience.
I lived out of my Chevy Blazer.
You did?
For a while.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah. That didn't surprise me.
Guitars, clothes, food, everything was in the back. Yeah. Just drove around.
Yeah, you're ahead of the time.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, head to the table.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
What are we talking about today, George?
What are we talking about today? So let's just get right into it.
When was the last time I saw you?
It was almost a month ago now, I think.
Yeah.
It's been a little while.
Summer will do that.
Yeah.
And I told you that I may not see you a lot this summer, but not to worry. I will make all sorts of content with my phone and selfie cameras and stuff, and I didn't do one. And do one.
Well, but you experienced the summer, which is probably more important.
Summers are extremely important to me. Mm-hmm. I need my summers, man.
Yeah. I think that comes from growing in Jersey. It's like it comes along with it.
It's so important to me.
Yeah. This summer was the first kind of normal summer that I feel like I experienced since pandemic. That 2021 was actually very challenging for me to kind of as everything opened back up. So I feel like this summer was kind of more like a real summer. Did you
travel?
I did a little bit. I mean, I traveled to England before the summer, but we did a little kind of workcation experiment. I went down to visit my in-laws and worked in the morning and hung out with them at night, and that was beautiful.
Where was that?
They're in Punta Gorda, so about the Fort Myers area.
Okay.
And that was really nice.
Great.
And I mostly just tried to get to the beach more than I did last year because, that's always the goal.
It is.
Yeah, so I was wondering if you want to get into it with... You had sent me a little while ago this video from Gary Vee, I think it was, and it was talking about investing as like fashion, like that people under 30 are investing.
I remember.
Now. Yeah, like there's this concept of engaging in like a pop culture way. I was wondering what your thoughts were on that and kind of.
I remember this piece.
Yeah.
Maybe you could put it up here, put a link to it, because I would like for other people to see it.
Absolutely.
If you go look at TikTok accounts of 15, 16, 17-year-olds, you have 16-year-olds that have in their bio, investor.
And I'm like, this is profound. What I'm seeing is a bigger convo. The rise of people saying, I'm an investor too, and then the rise of what they want to invest in. So now you've got 15 to 30-year-olds that think about investing, but they don't want to buy a one-family bedroom and make recurring revenue on rent. They want to buy a pair of Nikes that are going to go up 2x. They want to buy John Morant rookie cards. They want the NFT to put in their social media profile, and they want it to go up. That's very different than buying 75 shares of Turner, because investing is now more pop culture and fashion. Everyone now sees it as a viable cultural thing you do, and they just are gonna do it in new stuff. So alternative investments, that is a big deal, and it hasn't begun.
When I was a kid, being an investor was something that was reserved for the elite few. Like, you could be an investor if you were an investment banker, if you were a Wall Street person. You know, otherwise it was like doctors and lawyers like having a stockbroker, and they would call the stockbroker and they'd make stock trades or have a stock portfolio. Now, today, investing has become so broad and so widely accepted as something that people aspire to be. So now what you have is every young person in the world, if you go to their social media account and look at their profile, they all say investor.
Yeah.
Which I think is funny but good. And, you know, what do you invest in? And you'll get a lot of different responses. And the reality is that a lot of young people aren't really full-time investors. Most of them aren't. And maybe they've invested in some crypto or something
NFTs, something.
Yeah, for not a lot of money or whatever. But the point is that it's now something on people's radar, which is great. This is what they don't teach us in school, is to be an investor or to want to be an investor or how to be an investor, so that it's showing up on young people's social media profiles. I think, you know, whatever about that, it's good. It's a good thing. Now, here's where it's not a good thing, is if everyone out there thinks that they can be an investor and they don't deploy basic fundamental principles. They don't learn how to be a good investor. We've talked about this a lot here, George.
Yeah.
Like anything in life, like a great baseball bat swing, like being a ballet dancer, like driving a car, there are right ways and wrong ways to do it. And there's fundamental and basic principles that you have to learn as a foundation for investing or any discipline. So I hope that all the young people out there that have investor noted in their profile on social media are actually taking the time to learn how to invest correctly, safely, securely, and to do it in a way that's going to be good for them, not in a way that's pop culture status for them, where they can show their profile to someone and be like, I'm an investor, and like think that they're impressing someone, because you won't impress anybody and you're not really an investor. But look, if you're interested in investing, great. That's what we're here, to promote
100%.
Is learn about how to do it and get active doing it. So I think it's a good thing. I like the proliferation of investor in our society. I like how it's just become something that's trickled down and kids want to do it. 100%. It was something that kids never thought about or wanted to do. Same with being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Being an entrepreneur was something that was like, if you were an entrepreneur back when I was growing up, it was almost like you were unemployable. So you had to be on your own because no one else would want to deal with you or have you. And now everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. It's like driving me nuts.
Yeah.
But and like investing, go be an entrepreneur, but do it the right way. There's basic principles and there's foundational things that you need to learn and understand and really digest and have as part of your DNA if you want to be an entrepreneur. A lot of people say, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And they go about it like they're going to a food court in a mall, and they're like, I'll try this, and they don't. Yeah. You really have to have core stuff in your DNA to be a successful entrepreneur. Otherwise, you're just going to be a floundering entrepreneur. But I think the more you can learn about investing, the more people who are investing and talking about investing, and if you're talking about investing with your family, your friends, maybe you're part of an investment club, maybe you have Robinhood app, or maybe you have Happy Nest app, or maybe you have one of these apps that give you access to investing in things where that didn't exist before in your life. It's all good. Just be responsible about it, but learn how to invest wisely, learn the basic fundamental principles. There's lots of places to consume and get information on how to be an investor. Make sure the source is credible. And just read up on it and learn about it and get started with $100 or $10 or whatever. But I promise you, the more you think about investing, and the more you think about what to invest in and how to do it correctly, and it doesn't matter the amount of money you have, but the more you think about it, the better you're going to become at it, and it's going to put you on a path. So I think it's a good thing.
There's this nonprofit research group out in Harvard called Opportunity Insights. They recently conducted a study that seemed to show high correlation between upward social mobility and the relationships that you have with high net worth individuals.
Wait.
Yeah, sure.
Harvard researchers did a study and concluded that there is a high correlation between... Give it to me again?
Yeah, high correlation between upward social mobility, so like making more money, and being friends with high net worth individuals.
Wow, George. Yeah. And this was a Harvard study.
Yeah, yeah, indeed.
You know, so what are we talking about here? Because they didn't have Harvard back in caveman times, but the cavemen knew that if you wanted better stuff in life and social mobility, you had to know the right people.
All right, this essentially affirms that 5 closest friends.
Oh, theory. It affirms this study, this Harvard study affirms that. So these studies, I always love these studies. Research shows, studies find, like, how do you conduct a study like that? Like, I don't know. I'm not the smartest tool in the shed, but I know that I'm going to have more upward social mobility if I hang out with high net worth people and successful people, and hopefully they're cool and not annoying, and I can hang out with them and actually legitimately enjoy my time with them. But humanity has been social climbing since its inception. Since we turned from apes into people, we've been socially climbing. Yeah. And even the apes were social climbers.
But Jane Goodall talks about that all the time.
So, like, I don't know what the study is that they did at Harvard, but sure. I agree with that. Yeah. And what was the trunk of your question so that I can tie it all together?
No, I think my question was, how are you intentional about making those connections, designing your life in order to be in contact with high net worth individuals?
Well, for me, George, I make it a priority to be around people who I love and respect and care about. Yeah. If they're high net worth as well, that's a bonus for me because I'm in the business of dealing with high net worth people a lot. I make it a point to be around high net worth people. I seek them out. I go to events, I go to gatherings, I go to universities. I'm around large groups of people all of the time, conventions, you name it. I'm always seeking out the top. I'm always seeking out the best, the most successful. I don't know if someone's high net worth or not, because I think what I learned as the son and grandson of a retailer is you can never really judge a book by its cover in that way regarding money. So if you have in this case, my father and grandfather had a store. People would walk in and some were dressed very nicely and never spent any money, and some were dressed not nice and ratty clothes or whatever, and they spent a lot of money on something. So you can never really judge. So I don't judge based on looks, but I do have an interest in being around high net worth people because I'm in a business where that requires me to interface with people of certain net worths. We talk about being an accredited investor all the time, so I'm always around accredited investors.
I think that's a huge one, is doing business and not being afraid to step up your business game.
You can't be afraid. We were talking about don't be afraid to talk about money. I'm not afraid to talk about money, so I'm able to have conversations about money and finances and economics and business in the world like that with people that have achieved a lot. And I want to learn from them. I want to be around them. I'm looking for opportunity. I want to grow. I want to have a greater understanding. I don't describe myself as a social climber, but I am very interested in meeting with and speaking to people who are very successful because I want to learn and grow.
Well, and prioritizing relationship. I think that sometimes people feel like, oh, I don't want to be a social climber, so I'm not going to make that network connection, or I'm not going to talk to that person. But it's just relationships.
That's the fear. It's relationships. Look, I'm definitely not interested in meeting you if you're a high net worth person, but you're a jerk off.
Right.
Like that, I'll just take a hard pass on. And if I sense that you're a jerk off within the first 3 seconds of meeting you, I'll retreat and I won't have any interest in that. So if you're nice and mellow and cool and your feet are on the ground firmly, I'm definitely interested in meeting you, whether you're high net worth or not high net worth. And if you happen to be high net worth, great. We'll have conversations about that kind of stuff too. But, I love that it was a Harvard study that found that being around high net worth people increases your social mobility.
And thank God that they did that hard work.
Yeah, well, you know what that Harvard study was probably like? Someone was rich in that group and their dad flew them to Aspen for spring break on the jet. And they're like, wow, I wouldn't have done this if I didn't know Billy over here. So they probably concluded that way. But
sounds like a fun study to take part in. We were talking earlier about the home ownership dream, has that changed, all that kind of thing. Axios says it's cheaper to rent than buy in like 3/4 of U.S. cities.
Right.
What do you think about this? Why do you think this fails to make headlines versus like you always see like the rent is too damn high? That always makes headlines. What do you think about this kind of messaging doesn't get through in that way?
Markets shift all the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that long ago when renting was more expensive or at least on par with purchasing a home. But now with interest rates, now with housing prices, it's far more expensive to purchase a home and own a home than it is to rent, even though rent is still very high. Markets have to behave according to the natural dynamics of supply and demand, always and forever. If you're a housing consumer, like if you're not staying at your parents' house for free in a basement somewhere, and you're actually having to go out and consume your own housing and pay for it, you're either going to rent or you're going to be a homeowner. You got to decide where you are on the spectrum. It's based on your means. It's based on your income. It's based on your situation, your age, what you need out of life. Young people today, I say this over and over, George, young people today want flexibility and mobility. They want the opportunities to move in, move out, change where they live, move to a different city, move out to the country, move back when it's good for them, work from home, work for an office, hybrid, whatever. But the way we consume housing is completely changing right before our eyes. So young people today have to figure out what their housing needs are and then consume those needs.
Right.
There's older people that I know that are in their 70s and 80s that are having to figure that out too. They own homes, they're big homes, they want to downsize. There isn't a lot of options for them to downsize into because of interest rates and because of rents and because of pricing. So everybody, not just young people, everybody is priced out of different portions of the housing market. Why don't we hear about this? You know, it's a good question because the media, I think, likes to take a zinger and they like to spin it and shoot it right in our faces. Just like, hey, don't go and rent from that person over there. All you're going to do is make them rich and pay their mortgage. Like, that's a zinger, right? It's not really meant to be framed as a negative, dissuasive thing, yet that's what it is. And it's a bit unfair, and that's what media does. So I think that we don't hear a lot about what different options are and what the impact is on housing affordability and unaffordability to different age groups, because everyone's feeling it in different ways.
Right.
People that make a lot of money feel it a lot less. People that don't make a lot of money have to figure things out. And it's not just easy all the time. Like if you're a young person, maybe you have options that older people in their 70s and 80s who are retired and looking to downsize that they don't have. You have to find where you sit and where you fit in the housing consumption spectrum, and you have to consume the right product that's good for you and within your means. To frame it in a way that's like, we don't hear about it, or it's cheaper to rent than it is to buy, you know, that would only fuel different fires and come into play with agendas. I don't know. It doesn't seem like a rational or reasonable way to have the conversation about housing economics.
Yeah.
I think you got to talk about how, hey, it's cheaper to rent than it is to buy now. And that's why we're seeing an uptick in renter demand.
Yeah, which is so interesting because like home ownership, I was going to bring this up later, that home ownership was the exception and not the rule not too long ago. Like there was this article by Get Rich Slowly saying that in the 1950s, that was really the beginning of that concept of, oh, let's buy a house. That's normal.
Yeah,
everyone should buy
right.
a house. Otherwise, before that, it was not necessarily the norm.
You make an amazing point.
Yeah.
It wasn't until post-World War II euphoria where people came home from all ends of the earth. They came home from the war. They nested in the United States. They wanted to build families. The Industrial Revolution was just taking off. Yeah. Automobiles, construction, electronics. I mean, everything was in its infancy. There were jobs everywhere. People could live anywhere they wanted. It didn't matter if you were a teacher, a plumber, or a doctor, or a lawyer. Sure, there was different price points in nicer neighborhoods and less nice neighborhoods, but everyone could afford a home and everyone had a job. Now you fast forward to now, and the world's a different place, and not everyone can afford a home. But what did they do before the 1950s? People rented. By and large, the significant majority through history rented their homes up until you got to the 1950s. This was a result of a lot of things. But really, when you think about it, homes weren't built for consumers because we could rent them, right? We rented them before they made banking products that allowed us to buy our own homes. So I think that the housing and home ownership dream And fantasy is more a result of banking policy and government policy that promoted consumers purchasing their home and using a 30-year mortgage to do that. Because those 30-year mortgages are built for the banks. They're banking products. Yeah. They're not there to help us. Sure, they help us. They give us buying power and they get us into things where if we don't have 100% of the cash in our bank account to write the check, we need a mortgage. But they're really mortgage products and banking products. And there's a $1 trillion industry that's built around home mortgages, us borrowing money from the banks to buy homes that we live in these homes.
Yeah, coinciding with the 50s and 60s is like the boom of marketing and the ad men.
Completely.
So then you have that whole...
So you want to know what changed in the 50s and 60s?
Yeah.
A lot, but you got to look at government regulations and policies. You got to look at banking policies and the products that the banks were putting out there and what they wanted us to do with the money, right? We were depositing money in the banks. Remember, when we deposit money in the bank, what do they do with it? They don't just let it sit there in the vault in the back. They lend it out. So we're making deposits. We're borrowing our own money back. We're buying homes. We're locked in. But that's not the way it is anymore. And yes, you're right. You make a great point, and the pendulum is likely swinging back to pre-1950s housing consumer era where we all consume housing in different ways. There's a lot of renters out there, and I think you're going to see even more renters over the next several decades. I don't think it's going away.
Yeah. You mentioned government regulation and policy. I read in the DCist, 40,000 people were on the DC Housing Authority for housing.
40,000.
40,000
on the list.
On the list, waiting for vouchers for
to get affordable housing.
Only 20 new housing vouchers were introduced.
20,000?
No, 20.
20.
20.
Washington, D.C. has a list of 40,000 people in need, but only could supply 20 of
20 new
40,000.
ones. I think they have more than 20 in general, but they only added 20 to that list.
That's a staggering number.
Crazy.
40,000 of demand, they only could supply 20.
Yeah.
You know what, George? These cities and these towns alone, they themselves alone, control the housing policy that enables new inventory to get built. They themselves alone. This is not a situation where the free market is wide open and everyone can just jump in and construct housing and solve our inventory shortage. These towns themselves are in charge of what gets built, where it gets built. The neighbors and the constituents that live in these neighborhoods come out and they oppose new construction. They say, not in my backyard, NIMBY.
Yeah.
And this kind of stuff dictates what gets built, how much of it gets built, and it's no wonder. If you look at Washington, D.C., I don't know what their problem is because all around the city, from the southeast to the northeast, northwest, the whole darn city has been reconstructed and rebuilt over the past 20 years. There's lots of market rate housing. I mean, I see new market rate apartment buildings going up everywhere in places where I never even thought there could be apartment buildings in Washington, D.C. There's apartment buildings, neighborhoods that you would never go to that were just barren. It wasn't even like they were crime or whatever. It was just like there was nothing there. Where the train tracks come in, where you come in from BWI into Union Station in D.C. I mean, that whole area is so built up. Where's the affordable housing? The affordable housing gets squashed. It gets kiboshed. It gets regulated, over-regulated. There's no motivation. There's no incentive. You need when I say you, the cities and towns, need private developers, private money to come in and take risk and invest and spend and develop and build. That's how the affordable housing comes to fruition and actually materializes. But if you restrict it, if you don't regulate it the right way, if you don't promote or incentivize, then you're going to get all free market and no affordable. That's what's happened in Washington, D.C. George, 40,000 people on a list, and they only give out 20 vouchers. 39,980 more units of housing to satisfy that demand. Get to work, Washington, D.C. Go ahead and build it.
When it goes back to a few weeks ago, we talked about Houston and that partnership between private and public. And
it's a difficult thing to achieve, but Houston's able to do it. They solved 50%, 60% of their homeless problem over the past decade.
Insane.
And that's a great example.
Yeah.
But that's an amazing number where there's 40,000 people who need affordable housing. They only awarded 20 vouchers.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a mistake.
It sounds like like you read. So the mistake, like you read it off like it's a typo.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Like how can that happen?
I know. Yeah. Wild.
But listen, I got to say it again. The leaders in our cities and states and towns alone are in charge of how much housing production can get built. We have an inventory shortage. We have a production shortage. You have to stimulate the production of new inventory. The only way that happens is if it starts at the top and trickles down, and the leaders and city councils and governors and all the people in charge of setting policy set policy that allows housing production to occur. Without it, we're never going to build anything. You know, I saw that this year there's 420,000 new apartments coming online in our country. And it's the first time the number's been that high since the 70s. So there's something happening out there. But how much of that 420,000 is affordable? Probably not much of it. So it's going to be market rate housing. So we need to build more affordable housing. New York City alone is building, I think, 25 or 28,000 units of housing.
Yeah, in the last few months, it's been crazy.
It's been crazy, but everyone's rushing. You know, this is interesting. In New York City, everyone's rushing to get their permits in because there is a very favorable tax code law that's expiring.
Right.
So if you don't get your permits in and approved before the expiration of that code, you're subject to these taxes. So you want to build before the taxes come in. And that's the motivation, and that's being done in New York City.
Right.
But, you know, speaking of New York, in the past 12 years, New York City built like 165,000 units of new housing. Right. So that's great. It sounds like a big number.
Yeah.
The population in New York increased by 650,000.
Wow.
So they're not keeping up in pace. And I say that as an example because that ratio, that relationship of built supply to what the actual demand is, that disparity exists everywhere, not just in New York, everywhere.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We can't build enough. We can't build enough of it.
Yeah.
And it's all about the restrictive legislations and policies that our leaders are imparting. Everyone has an environmental slang. They've got an affordable slang. They've got an angle where they want to preserve and parks and open space and green space and changing from number 6 oil to number 2 oil and then changing from number 2 oil to gas or changing from gas. My God, Newton and Brookline, no gas. You have to build a new multi-million-dollar home in Newton or Brookline using all electric. There's an environmental issue that we all have to talk about and address, and we have to participate in a solution for sure. But to dictate that you can't build unless it's electric, I mean, homes aren't going to get built. Buildings aren't going to get built. Electric is not the cheapest way to fuel multi-housing.
Yeah, it's a lot of broad brush solutions for something that requires a lot of nuance.
Yeah, but look, this environmental thing, climate change, it's a real thing.
It's huge.
And people are just like throwing mud against the wall to see what sticks. 100%. I don't blame them for trying, but my point is, George, policy dictates the result. Yeah. We need better housing policy, housing incentives. We need to build way more than what we're doing. Of all price points, not just market rate, but it's got to be affordable. It's got to be mid-price. It's got to be market rate. It's got to be in all these locations, coastal, center country, everywhere. And we need a lot of it. And we need it now. And we can't be like, green lighting a project or two or ringing the bell when 20 new units come online. Aren't we great? No, you're not. You really got to move the needle. And the only way to move the needle is to do broad sweeping, highly impactful projects that can result in thousands and thousands and thousands and scores of thousands of new housing product coming online. And I don't see every state everywhere enacting policies like that. I mean, Texas is building a lot of stuff. New York's building a lot, but they're not keeping up with demand. So, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, how much is actually
doesn't matter. They're not keeping up with demand.
Yeah.
You want to balance out prices. You want to reduce pressure on housing, on rent and cost of ownership housing. Build more inventory.
Yeah, no, totally. We were just talking about New York, and I saw this headline about renters buying co-ops for like $2,500 in Chelsea, which seems crazy in and of itself. We can talk about that, but really what I wanted to ask first is, what's a co-op? This is, again, the rookie George
question.
What's a
co-op?
Yeah, what is a co-op?
It's a
how
cooperative.
Does it work? Yeah, how does that factor into the real estate world and your world? Yeah.
What's a co-op? So a co-op is a company that owns a building. And when you own a unit in the building, you don't own the fee simple real estate. You own shares of the company, and the company owns the building. That's what a co-op is. Yeah. And then everybody is a shareholder in the co-op, and your neighbors are shareholders. You're a shareholder. You all have to pay your own portion of the taxes. They measure the square footage of your unit, and they give you a percentage of the tax bill that you have to pay, and they give you a percentage of the common area and maintenance heating bill for the building that you have to pay. and then you're in charge of your own interior space, as if it were yours and you owned it like a condo or a piece of fee simple real estate. But you're owning shares of a company. You're not owning the fee simple real estate. Now, the shares of a co-op are financeable, and they're liquid and they're tradable. So it mirrors a lot of the features of other types of property ownership, but you own shares in a company.
Interesting.
But for me, what I think is interesting is that you didn't focus on the fact that, you mentioned it, but there's people buying $2,500 co-ops in Chelsea.
Well, that did
how many
out to me
people?
too, but
the market at large, or like 2 people?
I think it was 5.
5 people. So it's not the market at large.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I read about this building, and this is a city-funded project, and this is the city's attempt to build affordable housing. So applause for the city. Great job. You're building affordable housing. I think that's great.
Right.
And what they've done is they've created a co-op where 5 of the 44 units in this particular building are going to be owned, and the others are going to be rentals. And they're going to be rentals based on the income and the net median average of the area based on the HUD scale. So when you say people are buying co-ops for $2,500, let's just be clear. It's not the broad market. You and I, our viewers, can't go and buy co-ops in Chelsea for $2,500. The 5 people that were able to buy co-ops for $2,500 were lobbying the city for 4 decades, and they were on a special list, and the city had this building that they took back because the owner paid taxes, and that process of taking back ownership of the building from the delinquent guy took 30 of the 40 years. And then they had to figure out politically how to form the legal structure to then have these people come back into this building that they had to vacate from and then own a piece of the building. This is a complicated thing. Yeah. This can't happen every day. I applaud New York for doing it. It's certainly a good talking point. They're ringing the bell with this one, but it's 5 people.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. And I wish it were 500 or 500,000 that could do that, but it's 5. But why were they able to do it? Because the city took back ownership of this building and they decided what to do with the building, the asset, and their money. They said, we're going to make this affordable housing. We'll have some people rent. We'll have some people own it. But that's what we're going to do. But it takes a lot of effort to do that.
Right.
And cities everywhere have to emulate this particular example from New York in this case, because you have to offer affordable product into the marketplace. And if you don't lubricate the engines, and if you don't incentivize developers and entrepreneurs to build more inventory that's affordable, it's never going to get built. So I say to the governments and New York City and towns and cities everywhere, you go do it. You build more. Yeah. You don't like the cost of housing in your town? You go come up with policy that and come up with a budget, and you build. You become a developer. They're not doing it. No, thank you, they all say, George. They don't want to do that. They don't want to be builders. They're too busy running a town, whatever that means. But that's the answer. You have to build more, and the cities and states and towns need the private sector to come in and do it because they won't do it themselves.
That's about what I got. I was wondering, do you have anything else you want to touch on, discuss before we move on to Q&A?
Well,
yeah.
I'm surprised you haven't brought up Adam Newman and
my gosh, I forgot.
And the investment that he got. It's old news at this point because that was several weeks ago now. By the time our viewers see this,
but we haven't seen each other since.
You and I haven't seen each other.
Totally, yeah, it was really crazy.
But all right, here's what I'm going to say about that. I've spoken a lot about how housing is being consumed in new and different ways. A lot lately, I've been saying that. And this Newman situation is going to be exactly that. He's coming up with a new model for housing.
Right.
And he got this huge investment. People say, well, why would that investment have been made? Like, this guy's a failure. He screwed up WeWork. Why is he getting all this money to go do this deal? Well, first of all, he's putting a lot of his own money in. So that's the first thing. Second of all, this guy Newman is a needle-moving guy. He's in, I dare compare him to Elon Musk. But I'm just making a point that he's a guy that doesn't come out and do the same old thing and repeat and wash and rinse and repeat. He's trying something new, and if it works, it's going to be massive. And if it doesn't work, it'll be a loss for the investor, but it's not going to impact us as a society or consumer. But the payoff is so disproportionately outsized to the risk in this particular case that, he got $350 million from a very credible source. So as we watch this story with Newman and what he's doing with housing and apartments and buildings and real estate, we're going to see other examples of how we as a society are consuming housing in new and different ways. So, George, this is all happening because it's too expensive to buy, it's too expensive to rent. You want to get out of your mom and dad's house and get out of the basement. There's no other option in between. So there's got to be some solution, right? There's got to be something else other than rent, too high, buy, I can't afford it, or live with my folks, right? There's got to be something else. So this Newman thing is going to be just that,
right?
And it's going
to yeah.
it's going to be interesting to watch. Yeah. But we're going to see people consume housing in all sorts of new ways. There's going to be hybrid rental ownership. There's going to be lease with an option to purchase. There's going to be purchase with an option to turn around and lease out. The tax incentives, the government's going to have to get involved and change the tax code a little bit to incentivize us to do these things. But it's going to be a very interesting party to go to. So I'm psyched for that story.
Do you feel like WeWork was a good idea and just mismanaged, or do you feel like
I think WeWork was a great idea. Yeah. And it's still, communal office and shared office is still a great idea, and it's still very robust all over the world. But George, I think the problem with WeWork, yes, it was a little mismanaged. It was a little cavalier with the money. Every business can grow at a certain rate. Once you've achieved the maximum rate of velocity of growth for that business and you've exceeded that rate, you're actually going backwards and doing yourself harm. You're burning through cash resources way too fast, so then you have a capital demand issue that you have to address. The markets may not be there to supply you with the capital that you need. You've got a human resource issue because growth takes people. If you don't have the right people or the right number of people, you're going to be constrained from a human resource perspective. So there's a key velocity that businesses can all grow at, where it's the maximum velocity. And once you get beyond that, it's no bueno. So I think that's what Newman did with WeWork. I think he just exceeded the velocity. We've seen that a lot before, a billion times before. He wasn't the first, and he won't be the last to grow too fast. But if you Google businesses that grew too fast, you'll get a whole search result.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Awesome. All right. Well, that's what I got today, Peter. So we'll head to Q&A and then finish this out.
Do you feel good?
I feel great. Yeah, I've missed this. Yeah.
I missed it too.
Yeah. So.
Did you work out a lot this summer?
Oh yeah.
You ran?
Obviously, ran 3 times a week. Lifted. I lifted today.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm always doing that.
I need to do that.
Yeah. How's your plank going?
It's better than it was at the beginning of the summer.
There you go. That's all you can ask. Yeah. Or that's all I'm going to ask.
Plank you later.
Plank you later.
Plank you very much.
Another beautiful Q&A, Peter.
I'm ready, George.
All right,
let's
wonderful.
go.
So this is from Brendan Starkey.
Brendan Starkey.
And he
any relation to Zach Starkey?
I don't know. I hope so.
Any relation to Ringo Starkey?
He can connect us with Ringo. That'd be fantastic. He must be a listener, though. He said, I've heard you say how important it is to talk about money with people who know more about it than you.
Yes.
I want to do this, but don't know where to start. What are questions that you asked people early on in your career that really shifted the way you think about money?
Oh, so many. But you got to get up the nerve. And you can't be awkward about it. We're trained to feel awkward about talking to people regarding money issues. And we're trained and told that it's not polite to bring up money-related issues with people. I mean, it's crazy. So you have to get confident and good and comfortable, just like you're talking about like food or sports or whatever, because it's really just another topic in life. So you got to get good talking about it. If you feel uncomfortable or impolite or imposing or not good about talking to someone about money, get over that quickly. And when you start, just ask questions like, hey, how did you get to where you are? You can ask someone who's a CEO or is very successful. Say, hey, what's your opinion? What do you think I should do if I want to make a lot of money? Here are my interests. Or like, hey, whatever. You got to ask questions. And people who are successful, who are older than you, are generally really happy to share and give back and teach you these things and answer these questions. You got to get comfortable talking about money with everybody. Hey, what do you make? I make this much. I really want to make more. I'm trying to get on a path to making more. Or I haven't started investing yet. I'm looking for things to invest in. What can you recommend for me? I have maybe $10,000. What would you do if you were me? Things like that. You got to do that. You have to engage in a dialogue and a discussion. We don't talk about it in the schools. We don't talk about it at work. But these are exactly the places that we need to be talking about this stuff. So wherever you are, whatever your environment is, if you're working, if you're a student, if you're already out in the world on a path somewhere, get really good and comfortable talking to other people about anything and everything related to money. George, you can ask them, hey, what interest rate are you paying on your mortgage at home? I just refinanced and I'm paying 6%. Sounds high to me. Or you can say, I'm leasing my car. The dealership has a 0% lease plan. I think it's pretty good. I'm going to do it. Engage in discussions about anything and everything money. What the costs of things are, where the best deals are, how to make more money, how to be around people that are wealthier and more successful than you so that you can absorb and make more money yourself. All that stuff, you got to dive in. It's a big pool, but you got to dive in. A lot of us just sit back and are like, oh, like we won't talk about money, or I'm not going to ask him anything. I don't want to seem like I'm rude or I'm out of line asking someone else about money. It's all bullshit. Go ahead and ask, get a conversation going, and get really comfortable talking about money. You got to.
It's also a process that never ends. I mean, it'd be tempting to think that, Peter Siegel knows everything there is to know about money, but tomorrow you're talking to Fred Beans and talking to all the other people about things that
no one knows everything about money.
Yeah.
So you got to talk to everybody about money. Seek the knowledge, get good at it, get really comfortable at it. It's muscle memory, it's a reflex. So the more you do it, the stronger and better you're going to get at speaking about money. I promise you, try it. If you're a shy person, if you're not really someone that likes to talk about financial things at parties or with other people, try it. Try it for a month. See what happens. You're going to get really confident and really comfortable talking about money. And I'll tell you what, if the conversations you're having are about how little money you have and how little money you're making, watch what happens to your mindset. You're going to get pissed off that you keep saying that you're the low man on the totem pole financially. You're going to want to change that. I bet.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks so much, Peter, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, George.